it just reminds us of where we've come from, and that sometimes we forget about the impact of things at certain times in history, and how we have to make decisions that are obviously really uncomfortable at the time, but are simply the right things to do. And I think about through this year of 2020, and we were discussing it last week, we were talking about how we've been affected by so much of our the pandemic and certainly social climate and things that have affected us all. So we have to think about the importance of our decisions into 2021. What does our community look like? And I think the tree, again, back to the tree. And so that's where I wanted to start this morning. I think the Lord has helped us understand in many ways more of our purpose as a community this past year. I think even in light of a pandemic, maybe it's even compounded some of that. And it's tested us over and over. Like in any time of upheaval, there's always a moment where we stop in our tracks, if not many, many moments of that, and we take stock of ourselves and reflect on what we're really about. I think a lot of us have been more honest than ever about our own selves, about having to feel instead the effects of isolation and how that affects our own mental and emotional and spiritual state, and how many of us have suffered with various points of depression throughout the year. But what it also shows for us is it gives us a moment to reflect on what is going to be the most important thing that we're going to do. And so those are the questions I know that have bounced within our heads, throughout in our hearts throughout this year in 2020. It's not just me, it's many, if not all of us, who've had to kind of work through those different things. And I think that The Secret Life of Trees, as I mentioned earlier, has been one of those formative moments for me, because in that book, we find ourselves in this beautiful metaphorical connection with the grand foliage, the grand plant of our world that gives us oxygen, that helps us live, and yet does that to all the plants around it, all the life around it, and how giving the trees are. And I don't mean that just in hyperbole. I think that's literally a scientific fact. So that selfless kind of life giver in the forest, I think, is easily juxtaposed with Jesus's own connection when he begins to illustrate the kingdom of heaven being that of a tree. And when he likes it to a tree, and he says in Matthew 17, and he talks about that tree being like the kingdom of heaven, not only growing from a mustard seed and becoming a great tree, but what it provides in the plant itself as it puts out its branches and makes a home even for the birds. So I believe I'm convinced more than now more than ever, excuse me, now more than ever, that the essence of our own spiritual community is wrapped up into that very idea. We're somehow like a tree, providing shelter, providing refuge and sustenance for all who seek it, whenever and wherever and whoever. And there's no discrimination in that. And it's in that same vein, I believe, that we did not waver this past year as painful injustices confronted our own society throughout the summer months. Once again, even though a pandemic was going on, we tried to figure out ways to be a help and support and solidarity with the most affected. We recognize the importance to stand with our hurting brothers and sisters of color. We wanted to lead out even wherever we could, like among even my own fellow progressive churches and spiritual communities, by writing letters to the editor, by trying to formulate, public statements and plans to speak out against systemic racism wherever we saw it, and to stand in solidarity with those hurting. We embraced our own identity, I believe, in that we are a tree. We are a tree, just one of many. I mean, we're just one tree, but we're a tree, and a place for the birds to build their nests. And I think that that's constantly being tested, but it's a beautiful test. It's a test of, are we willing to extend our branches out as far as they can go, so that people have a place to have refuge a place to get out from under the heat of the sun, a place to rest their legs. And this is the test, I believe, of 2021. It is our continuation of that mission on those branches, building out those branches. So I feel that that's been our draw, and I think that that's folding into our each of us in our different mission groups and our different kind of callings. We're each being challenged to test out those branches. We're being called to grow out those branches even fuller, and to make sure that we're inclusive branches in everything we do, so that nests can be built, right? So that birds can perch. And I know that in my own walk here in our church, as some of us have been called out in our new mission group to build and create that space as a center for racial justice and healing, that we see that importance. It makes me think when we were all growing up and we first started becoming familiar with the phrase to offer an olive branch, and we all know that. I don't think many of us had ever envisioned an actual branch, but or how that could be that we are the branches. But most of us know that now. We are the branches. Now Jesus even says that, right? I am the vine, you are the branches. I mean, it just gets more and more clear, right, in John 15. So we are those branches. We must grow those branches out. And just like in John chapter 15, where Jesus says to go and bear fruit that will last, we also are called to the same task. And we can see this in Jeremiah. So we go to the old scriptures and we could see this in Jeremiah 17. I wanted to look that up quickly. In Jeremiah chapter 17, verses 7 and 8, it says this: "But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence rests in God. They will be like a tree planted by the water, that sends out its roots by the stream. It does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in a year of drought, and never fails to bear fruit." I believe that scripture can easily be identified by ourselves as a community. It's a promise and a challenge all wrapped up into one. Our mission of loving others, like in John 15, when Jesus said specifically, "Go and bear fruit that will last." He seems to specifically be referring to a love or the fruit is love for one another. That we must maintain our roots in the river on one side as we are extending the roots out to others on the other side. We must stay in a state of inward growth, inward healing, inward authenticity, honesty. And that will be the test in 2021. Can we stay refreshed and awake enough to be the tree we need to be? I believe we will, but it will take considerable commitment from all of us. We must prop each other up and provide opportunities to practice the disciplines, those outward disciplines and inward disciplines that we ascribe to, many of us anyway. Think about one of them being daily connection with God through prayer, which sounds pretty traditional. But of course, many of us believe within that discipline is this contemplative silence, or this contemplative state, this reflective peace that is required in order to hear God. And there also in that state, we find ourselves drawn to the scriptures and to God's wisdom, to study and to learn. And secondly, there's a true kind of stepping out that happens in our love of others, right? Our love for one another. And that doesn't just mean it within our community. I mean, that's easy. Jesus said anyone could do that. It's loving your enemies that's the challenge. And that's where we're at. How do we love those who reject our own love? But we must demonstrate our love to all of God's creation, all and within creation, even other human beings. And thirdly, let us not harbor the resources that God gives us. Just like the trees, the nutrients and all that we take from the earth and from the sun, from our environment, we must pass those along. Not just by building out the tree and its branches, which is great, but also just like in the hidden life of trees and in that video we watched, it's to give out that nutrients and that love and that care to everyone else too around us. We all need healing. We all need transformation. So let that flow freely through us to others. That's the gospel message. It's a message of being, not simply telling, not simply doing, but being. Transformation of heart and mind. This is where it starts. The renewing of our minds, right? The renewing of ourselves. But that transformation, though it begins with us, it extends out to all. And it doesn't fit necessarily our own personal pattern of what transformation looks like. God is in the business of healing. God is in the business of pulling unity together. And it's not to just look like you or look like me. No way. In fact, it's the diversity and the differences that it seems to be the beauty of God's creation. So we shouldn't fight that. No, we accept and we love. And we expect there to be many differences. So may 2021 be our defining moment as a community working towards love in all things. And may it be individually our defining moments where we are loving and our heart is in it. And we believe in that transformational living in all aspects of our lives, every facet, every piece. And within that and from that, inward and outward aspects of our own journeys, let us grow out our branches. Let our roots extend outward, and let us love truly one another. Shalom.